Am I the a-hole for not contacting my sister-in-law about our niece's period and instead handling it myself? My wife and I are in our mid-20s. My wife's older sister Kate has a daughter named Peyton, fake name. Kate has to travel for work every few weeks, so Peyton stays either with us or with her grandparents. We had her earlier this week. I had the day off, but my wife had to work, so Peyton and I were just having a chill day around the house. She went to the bathroom and shortly after started crying, which freaked me out. I went to the door and asked if she was sick or hurt. She said no. After some questioning, I was able to deduce that she started her period and just didn't know what was going on. I made sure she got decent, new clothes, showered, and such, and then explained, as best as I could, that she was going through something natural. I got her some of my wife's pads and explained how to use them. She was clothed and clean for every interaction. I didn't really feel the need to inform her mother. I figured Peyton would text her or call her or tell her when she got picked up the next day. My wife got home and explained more things, and apart from feeling physically unwell, Peyton did fine. Yesterday, 2 days after she got picked up, Peyton's mom called me absolutely screaming me for A, not calling her immediately, and B, not waiting for my wife or another woman to explain things to her. It's not uncommon for Kate to be explosive. But this was extreme even for her. She's saying I'm inappropriate, a creep, and that Peyton doesn't feel safe staying at our house unless my wife is home, which I don't believe is true. Peyton and I get along great. She reminds me of when my own tomboy sisters were tweens. Did I do something wrong? Am I the a-hole for not calling Kate and not letting a woman handle this? Am I the a-hole for refusing to do housework while my boyfriend goes to work, even though I don't have a job? I, 19F, have been dating my boyfriend, 25 meters, for 5 months now, and he's amazing. However, one disagreement we often have is over housework. My boyfriend thinks that I should do housework, seeing as he works 48 hours a week, and I'm not in employment. I have always refused. We don't live together. We live in separate houses, and pay separate rent. I afford rent through my university student loan, as well as tutoring and babysitting part-time. So in my opinion, I have no reason to clean his house, when I have my own that I pay for. My boyfriend thinks it's unfair that I don't really work, yet have enough money to rent. In his eyes, I should do household chores for him, because he is the breadwinner. The thing is, I don't see him as the breadwinner. He doesn't pay for my rent, I do. We aren't married, and I'm still in education. I can't tell if I'm being unreasonable. I cook for him, and occasionally help with chores, but I refuse to be a full-time maid for him. Then again, he works so hard, whereas I only work a few hours a week. Am I the a-hole? Am I the a-hole for refusing to DD anymore and leaving 3 drunk friends stranded? I, F, have 3 friends from college, Maisie, Tom, and Neela. We're all mid-30s now. We usually get together once a month to have dinner despite work and family obligations, virtually during the global event. 6 months ago, I had to stand up to everyone about splitting the bill evenly because everyone else orders and eats appetizers and desserts, and everyone else drink copious amounts of alcohol every time we get together. I typically eat a main and drink water. I started checking menus in advance and only bringing enough cash to cover my bill plus tip, and would forget my card at home, and eventually sternly told them that I was no longer willing to pay an additional $50, $100 every time we went out to cover their appetizers, desserts, and drinking habits. Well, they all decided because I wasn't drinking anything but water, I should be the DD, which I initially agreed to because I was just happy that they eventually stopped arguing with me about splitting the bill. But at the time I told them firmly if any of them ever threw up in my car, that would be the end of it. Last month, Tom nearly threw up in my car. The only reason he didn't is because I pulled over and pulled him out of the car and onto the pavement instead. I sent a group text the next morning stating that I was no longer going to DD, and everyone complained that Tom only almost threw up in my car. I again refused and told them that next month, they either had to limit their drinking so they could drive, or they had to find their own ride. Last weekend, I reminded everyone I wasn't driving anyone home. No one limited their intake at all, and by the end of the night, they were too drunk to even handle paying their bill. I went up and asked for my bill separately, paid, and walked out without saying goodbye. Tom's wife had to have her mother watch their 2 kids while she had to come down, cover their bills, and give Maisie and Neela rides home, and Tom and Maisie both threw up in her car. I was getting hateful calls and texts all week telling me I had to pay to have Tom's wife's car cleaned and pay his mill for watching the kids. Maisie and Neela have been calling me all kinds of names for abandoning them, but I snapped that they were all 3 sheets to the wind even after being told last month I wasn't driving them anymore. Tom eventually called to yell at me that if I didn't split the bill, and if I didn't DD, then what use was I? I asked if that was how he treated his wife, Maisie, or Neela, if they were only allowed to be around if they were useful, because here I thought we were all just enjoying one another's company, since I certainly wasn't gaining anything useful from them spending hundreds of dollars funding their eating and drinking habits and then wasting my gas to drive their drunk asses home. Am I the a-hole for telling my roommate that her anorexia is not my problem? We are both 23F. It's been getting into the 90s, F, where we alive, so I've been turning on the AC when I get home. I also work a physically intense outdoor job, so I come home really sweaty and exhausted from the heat. The apartment will stay cool enough for me to fall asleep, but then later on I'll wake up in the middle of the night completely drenched in sweat. I'll then get up and find out that my roommate has been switching the AC off while I'm sleeping. This really upsets me because it's been making me really dehydrated and tired to begin with from not sleeping well, and it's been impacting my work. She's unemployed right now, so I thought she might have been hung up about the power bill. When I finally talked to her about it, I explained that I'm already very sensitive to heat to begin with, and that because we're fortunate enough to have AC, I want to enjoy it when I get home, especially after a long day at work, and that the heat is causing problems for me. I even offered to foot some of her share of the power bill if she was really that concerned about it. But then she said that she turns it off because the apartment gets too cold. I should add that our AC is set at 70 and has never been moved lower than that. I told her that she should just use some blankets or put a sweater on if it was really bothering her, because the heat is unbearable. She then countered by saying that because she's in recovery from anorexia, she's really sensitive to cold and that I'm not prioritizing her needs. I then responded by saying, I'm sympathetic to your situation, but that is your problem and not mine, and it is starting to have a negative impact on me, and we need to find some middle ground here, because I can't take off my skin when it gets too hot. She then got extremely upset and angry and told me that I was being ableist and insensitive. I'm kind of bothered by this because I've also had struggles with eating disorders in the past. So am I the a-hole here? Am I the a-hole for freaking out when my wife locked our son out of the house at night after he drank alcohol? I, am 39, have a 16-year-old son with my wife, F40. This incident happened a few days ago and she's still mad at me. I was on a work trip, so my wife was at home with our son. When I got back, I found out that he had been hanging out with his friends and they convinced him to drink some beer and he got a little drunk. I'm not saying what he did was right, but him and I had to talk about it and it's fine. The problem is that when he came home and my wife found out, she was furious and kicked him out and refused to let him back in until the morning. He was begging her to let him, but she wouldn't. When I found out, I was furious. Regardless of what he did, she made a slightly drunk teenager stay outside by himself at night. Something very bad could have happened to him. We had a huge argument over it. I asked her how the hell she thought that was okay. She just kept saying that it's our son's fault for drinking alcohol. My wife isn't really talking to me now and my son isn't talking to his mom. I feel like I'm in the right, but maybe I'm not. Am I the a-hole?